This is the DDPAI Z50 dash camera. Now this is a 2-channel dash camera, so it's got a front-facing camera and it also has a rear-facing camera in the back. It also has built-in GPS, so it does track your speed and location. And I've been testing this dash cam for about 3 weeks now because I've got a new Jeep on order, should be here hopefully next month, and I'm on the quest to find the right dash camera for it. Now, I don't want to do too many spoilers here, but long story short, I had a lot of high expectations for this camera, and while there are a lot of good things about it, there are some other things that could use some improvement. But first, let's talk about what I do like. I do like the form factor, and I like the build quality of this. Matter of fact, the build quality of this dash camera is one of the best that I've ever tested. It's just really well machined, it's really well built, it feels good, it feels solid. It's a really nice piece of hardware. Also, the form factor is great because it's a very low profile design. It's very thin, so when you have this mounted on your windscreen, it just sits very, very flush to it, okay? It's not one of these dash cameras where it's hanging down and it's just kind of in your face and, you know, it's very intrusive. This is a dash camera that, for the most part, you're not going to notice a whole lot, and that's what you want. One thing worth noting is that because this thing does have a very low profile design, it does not have a mounting bracket. So what most dash cameras do is they have a separate mounting bracket that you attach to your windshield, and then the camera will essentially click into that. That's not how this one works. This one, in order to keep it as flush as possible, it just has some 3M sticky tape on the back, and it basically just sticks directly to your windshield. Now, alternatively, it also comes with these little electrostatic sheets of plastic, and this is what I used when I was testing it. I used one of these. The way this works is it doesn't use any adhesive to stick to the glass on your windscreen. Instead, you just kind of peel the protective film off, stick it up there, and it'll magically hold really well. Then you stick the dash camera onto that. And that way, it's a little bit easier to remove from your windshield without leaving a whole bunch of gunky residue. The only thing to note is that you cannot remove this very easily from the plastic. Once the dash camera is on either the glass or the plastic, it's pretty much there to stay. On the top of the dash camera, we are powered by a USB-C plug. I'm very happy about that. I'm very happy that most new dash cameras these days use USB-C. Right next to it is the little mini jack that runs the cable to the rear camera. On the side over here is the micro SD card slot, and what I like too, and this is an indicator of the quality build here, is that it has this nice little rubber flap. Okay, most dash cameras do not do this. They just have a exposed SD card sticking out there, so it's a nice little touch that they have the flap. On the front of the dash camera, we have the screen, and we also have 4 unmarked buttons at the bottom here. When the dash camera is off, you have no idea what these buttons do. There's no labeling on it. But when the dash camera does power up, it puts little virtual button indicators above it so you can see what they do. The first button here you use to toggle between the front and the rear cameras. The second button is the button that gets you into the settings, into the menu system. The third button you use here to review all of your footage. And the last button here is interesting because it has a little icon that indicates it's a power button. It actually doesn't do that, and I'm going to talk more about what this button actually does later. But anyway, these are the 4 buttons that you use to control all the functions of the dash camera. Now, there is one button missing, and it's kind of a critical one, and that is an incident button, okay? This is the only dash camera I have ever tested that does not appear to have a separate button for triggering incidences, okay? And what an incident button is say you're driving down the road and all of a sudden a semi-truck on fire goes flying over the overpass and crashes, right? Well, wow, cool. I want to record that and make sure that recording does not get overwritten, because the way dash cameras work is that once they fill up, they just start overwriting old footage. But if you see something awesome, you want it to save it to permanent storage. So there is usually an incident button. You press the button and it will generally save 10 seconds prior to pressing the button plus another minute after that, right? That's how most dash cameras work. This one has no such button. The instruction manual mentions nothing about it. I've tried everything. I've tried pressing these buttons to see if they just would work. I've tried long pressing the buttons, multiple combinations of buttons. As far as I can tell, there's simply no way to tell this dash camera to record an incident. Hey, something happened. I want you to remember this. But there is a cheat for this. The only way I have found around this is to physically hit the dash camera. You have to tap it or hit it fairly hard, and that will trick the dash camera into thinking you just got into a wreck. And so then it will force it to save that footage to permanent storage. So this is a pretty major oversight because I consider the incident button to be a critical feature of any dash camera, and this does not appear to have one. The next thing that is unfortunately missing is a polarizing filter, or for that matter, any way to actually add a polarizing filter to this. The way that the lens here is designed, there's really no way to add a slip-on polarizing filter, and there are no threads on it to add a screw-on type polarizing filter. Now, I talk about polarizing filters a lot in all of my dash camera videos because, well, they're really, really helpful for reducing glare on your windshield. On sunny days, your dashboard will tend to reflect off of the windscreen or off the windshield, and it just kind of mucks up your image. And here's an extreme example right here. It looks like the camera is facing straight down at my dashboard, but it's not. It's looking straight ahead, and what you're seeing is the reflection of my dashboard on the windshield. This is an extreme case. Nevertheless, a polarizing filter here would have greatly reduced, if not eliminated, this glare. Okay, so let's talk about the video quality. The front camera records in 4K and the rear camera records in 1080p. Oddly, both cameras record at only 25 frames per second, which is a bit low for a dash camera, and as a result, the footage isn't as smooth as you'd normally expect. 30 frames per second is really the norm these days, and some dash cameras now even offer 60 frames per second. The good news, however, is that the Z50 records using the HEVC, aka H.265 video codec, so the file sizes are about half the size of files on other dash cameras that record in the older H.264 format. I don't mean to get too technical here, but long story short is HEVC and H.265 are good things to have. That also means that the bit rates of about 26 megabit for the front camera and about 6.3 megabit for the rear camera, those are pretty good bit rates. I should point out that the video quality coming directly off of the SD card is significantly better than what you are seeing here on YouTube. You are seeing fourth generation video, not the original video, because the original video is what the camera saved to the micro SD card. The second generation is what Final Cut Pro exported when I was done with this review, and the third generation was after I compressed the review for uploading to YouTube. Then YouTube recompressed it again, which is the fourth generation, and that's what you are seeing now. So while the sample footage here looks good, the original footage on the SD card looks a lot better. The rear camera, however, is a different story. It's 1080p, but sometimes it looks like a home movie shot on Super 8 film from the 1970s. There's something going on with the automatic white balancing here, and it causes things to look very orange and sepia tone. Plus, the slow 25 frames per second frame rate helps contribute to that 1970s home movie look. The white balance isn't just off. As you can see here, it floats around rather rapidly like it's hunting for the right setting, and sometimes it actually holds a proper value for a while and things look normal, but inevitably it'll start moving all over the place and it usually ends up looking kind of orange again. Now, it doesn't do this all the time. My observation has been that it is prone to doing this on sunny days. On overcast days like in this footage here, it usually looks correct with a proper white balance and no rapid color shifting. The front camera does fine with nighttime footage. Since this is a 4K camera, the pixels are smaller and therefore they capture less light, and as a result there's more gain noise than you might see on a 1080p dash camera. But overall the image quality is pretty typical. It's hard to read signs and license plates at night on any dash camera due to the slow shutter speeds, but since the Z50 records at 25 frames per second, those exposure times are even longer than usual. The result is going to be a little more blur. The rear camera, however, is pretty bad. Most of the footage is extremely grainy and has a tremendous amount of compression artifacts, way more than normal, especially for a 1080p camera. Every so often you get something that looks pretty clean, but most of the time it's noisy with pretty noticeable compression artifacts. The camera does have a built-in microphone which you can toggle on and off, but for some reason the audio recordings are extremely low volume. This is a test of the DDPAI microphone. Let's see how good the audio is. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. This is a test of the audio. There's no setting to adjust the mic sensitivity. This is just how it records audio. It's basically inaudible. So now let's talk about another common dash camera feature, and that is parking mode. Parking mode, when it's properly implemented, basically means that when your car is parked, your dash camera will go into a hibernation mode where it's waiting for something to happen. So say somebody wrecks into your car or somebody breaks into your car, that will trigger the dash camera to turn back on, continue recording, and it usually, with a proper implementation, it'll usually also have buffered up 10 seconds of video before that incident occurs. So it will record 10 seconds before the impact and then usually about another minute after the impact. Proper implementation. Now, the DDPAI Z50 here works a little bit differently, but it does give us essentially 3 different options for parking mode. Now, the first option is if you just don't want parking mode. In that case, you just wire it up to a power source in your car that turns off when the car turns off and it turns back on when the car turns on. That way your camera just basically just turns on and off every single time. No parking mode, just powers up when the car is powered up. That's fine for a lot of people. Now your second option, and it would normally be the preferred option, is to use a Hardwire parking mode cable like this one here from DDPAI. So this one here comes with a whole bunch of little adapters. These are for your fuse boxes. And I have to apologize because I was unable to fully test this, because even though this comes with 3 different sizes of adapters, none of these fit the fuse box in my Jeep here. My Jeep has very small fuses, and even the smallest one of these adapters just was still too big. And because I'm about to trade this car in for a new one, I didn't want to start splicing wires and doing all that fun stuff. So I just decided to let that go and not fully test it. But it ends up that, well, there may be some issues with this parking mode anyway. It took me a very long time to figure out how this parking mode worked because the instruction manual says essentially nothing about it. And there's very, very little information on the internet about it. According to what little information I could find on the internet, when you're using the Hardwire parking cable, all the camera will do is go into a 24-hour time-lapse mode. Basically, it just means the camera stays in this parking mode for 24 hours, recording, I guess, at 1 frame per second time-lapse. And that's okay in certain cases, but there are also some issues with it. One of the issues is that this parking mode cable is missing a very important feature, and that is a low voltage cutoff. Every other parking cable I have ever seen on any dash camera has circuitry in it which protects your car battery. And it's usually settable. So like, say you just want the power to the dash camera to be cut if your battery voltage drops even a little bit. Okay, you can usually set that. So on most of my dash cameras, I set it to something like 12.4 volts or 12.1 volts, something like that. And these cables will usually let it, you can set it so that it'll go like say down to 11.4 or 11.8 volts, which I would never want my battery to drain that low, but they're configurable. That's my point. This one does not let you configure it. Plus, I do not believe it even has the voltage cutoff circuitry in it. I checked the Amazon listing for this cable. It makes no mention of it. It doesn't appear to have it. So I have a feeling that this cable will not protect your battery. So that's problem number 1 with a 24-hour mode. You don't know what it's going to do to your battery. Secondly, time lapses are only so useful. They can fill up your SD card rather quickly if it's going for a long time. Now, I contacted DDPAI about this, and what they told me was that yes, it does do a 24-hour time lapse, but supposedly you can also have it just do 24 hours of regular recording. Now that's the last thing you want, right? You do not want your camera running for 24 hours straight, especially with no low voltage cutoff circuitry. I would never do that. As a matter of fact, in all of my other cars that have this feature, I never let it stay in parking mode more than maybe 2 or 3 hours. Any more than that, it's likely to have an effect on your car battery. So the parking mode is a little weird. And like I say, I was unable to test this myself. So, if anybody out there knows differently than what I was able to learn, please let me know. But that is what it appears to do. Okay, there's a third option for parking mode. The third option is that you simply plug this into a power source that never shuts off, right? So maybe you've got a 12-volt cigarette plug that's always on in your car, like my Jeep has here. In that case, the dash camera is always powered, and it will automatically go into sleep mode or parking mode after 15 minutes of there not being any motion detected. So you park your car, it's not moving, the dash camera does a good job of knowing that, and after 15 minutes, it will shut off. So that's kind of a quasi parking mode. That means you've got 15 minutes of it just recording regular footage. It's not really parking mode footage, but it's footage. So you have it. But there's a couple of problems with the way this is implemented. So the first problem is that, say somebody runs into your car, okay, motion detection, it will trigger the camera to then boot back up and start recording again. Well, it takes a very long time for this camera to boot up. By the time it's done booting, whoever just rammed into your car has probably already driven away. Additionally, it doesn't queue up any footage prior to the impact, right? I said it before that most dash cameras will save 10 seconds of footage before the incident and then continue recording for another minute after that. This won't do that, so you won't know what happened before the incident, and you're not going to know for quite a while after the incident because the camera takes so long to boot up. Okay, so that's that problem, but here's the doozy. When you get back into your car and you turn it back on and drive away, the Z50 will not automatically turn back on. It should, it doesn't. I have tried everything. I have tried pressing the buttons on the front to see if that would turn it back on. It does not. I have tried long pressing buttons to see if that will turn it back on. It will not. It appears that once it's asleep, it's asleep. The only thing that will trigger it to turn back on is an impact. So that means that you have to physically hit the camera to trick it into thinking that there was an impact, and that'll boot it back up. You can do pretty much everything that you need to do from the Z50's built-in menu system. But sometimes it's just plain easier to use an app to do all the settings and alignment and stuff like that. And also, if you ever need to download any footage off of the camera, sometimes it's just a lot easier to use the app to do that rather than popping out the SD card and taking it to computer and doing it that way. One of the great things about this dash camera is that it does have built-in Wi-Fi that is always on. You don't have to manually turn it on like you do with other dash cameras. It's on. So all you have to do is you go into your settings, you look for the DDPAI Wi-Fi network, you connect to it, then you go back, you run the DDPAI app, it finds the camera, voila, we are in, and I don't have it mounted here, but this shows you a live view through the camera. Okay, so you can see what the camera is seeing. You can, toggle and do all sorts of fun things, look at the back camera, and the lines are for aligning the camera and stuff like that. First, I want to talk about the settings. So this camera, it doesn't have a whole lot of configurable settings. I'm a little bit disappointed with that. I do like dash cameras that let you really fine-tune the settings the way that you want the dash camera to work. But let's go through kind of some of them here, and we'll talk about what it can do. So first of all, let's talk about, I don't know why I just dinged, let's talk about the recording resolution. So it ends up that if you do want a higher frame rate, you can record at a lower resolution, 2K or 1080p. If you set it to either of these, it will record at 30 frames per second. But if you want 4K, that's why you bought this camera, right? You're still stuck at 25 frames per second. You can also toggle on and off the date and time display and also the speed display. So you may remember in the sample footage in the corner down there, it shows you a date stamp and a speed stamp. You can optionally turn that off. One thing, unfortunately, that you cannot turn off is the DDPAI branding stamp logo thing there. It always bugs me when dash cameras put their stamp on all your footage because there's no reason for it. So no way to turn that off. You'll notice also microphone recording, you can toggle it on and off, but there is no volume setting. Remember from the sample footage, the recording volume is excruciatingly low and there's no way to adjust it here. So, there are a few other things you can set. There's the motion sensor sensitivity, which is basically the impact detection. So you can set it to high, medium, and low. I just have it set to medium for now. And you can also luckily update the firmware in the dash cam through the app as well, which is nice because unfortunately I've had a few recent dash cameras that do not have this for some reason, and it's a real pain to update the firmware. So this is really nice that it does let you do that. Okay, so if we go back, by the way, here's more footage. I have a blank screen there. I apologize that there's just no easy way to put this thing back on the windshield once I took it off. Okay, here's an interesting thing that I've never seen in another dash camera app, and that is this really cool timeline draggy thing here. It's like basically a timeline slider. And this is great because it just lets you scrub through all the footage on the camera really quickly, and you can go by date. So say I wanted to look at what footage I had on October 4th. Well, there it all is. It's just all there, just in order. It's great. If I want to look at just today, here's all the footage from just today and yesterday. I really, really like this. Now, unfortunately, there's no way to actually download from here. It's just kind of a preview thing. If you want to download, then you have to hit this download button. This takes you to a more traditional looking thumbnail screen that you usually see on pretty much every other dash camera app. And it's sorted by date, and it has all of your little 1-minute clips in here, and you just select what you want and hit the download button. But there's a weird thing here, and that is that there's no way to view the footage from this screen. You can only view the footage on the scrubber bar. I don't know why. I mean, the scrubber bar doesn't let you download, but when you go to download, you can't actually view what you're downloading. All you get is this thumbnail. That's really weird. But on a good note, if you do want to download something, it's actually a bit faster than most dash cameras I've tested. And the reason is that it's using that HEVC video compression, which compresses these files to about half the size of what they would normally be with old style compression. Therefore, the downloading is, I'm not going to say it's twice as fast, but it's pretty close to that. It's significantly faster than most dash cameras. So thumbs up on that right there. I'm not going to let that keep going there. Also, it does show you, because as the GPS, it will normally show you the tracks, although it doesn't appear to be doing it today. Enter playback video. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now it's showing my track that I had yesterday. And what else can it do? Oh, it can also bring up just some statistic information about your speed and your location and G-forces and things like that. It's kind of cool. Overall, this isn't the best dash cam app I've used, but it's not the worst. It basically works, but it has its quirks, as you can see. So, in conclusion, the DDPAI Z50 is a dash camera with a lot of potential. And I really did want this to be the dash camera for my new Jeep that's coming in soon, but in the current state, there are really just too many problems with it for me to justify doing that. The two main problems are, well, one, the lack of an incident button, and two, the lack of a proper parking mode. Now, a lot of these things could be fixed in future firmware updates, so let's hope that they do that, because this is, really, it's got the guts of a great dash camera. It's really well built, it's well designed, 4K footage looks great, and also, depending on where you shop, it's only about $120. That's a great price point for a 2-channel 4K dash camera. Well, I hope that this video has been helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And as always, thank you for watching.